Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome, everyone. If you are tuning in today, consider yourself the learner.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are the kind of person who does not just want the passing headlines. You actually want to understand the structural forces underneath them.
Right. You want to connect the dots.
Exactly. Whether you are prepping for a massive global strategy meeting this week, or you simply have this insatiable curiosity about how our deeply complex world fits together, you are in the right place.
We are completely bypassing the superficial noise today.
We are. This is a custom-tailored deep dive.
It is great to be here. And, deep dive is exactly the phrase we need to lean on today.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the sheer volume of global reporting right now, the velocity of the news cycle is it is staggering.
It really is.
Our objective today is not just to repeat what happened. We want to find the signal in all this noise.
To unpack the mechanics of why these events are unfolding.
Right, and what they mean for the broader systems we all rely on.
So let us ground ourselves first. Today is Monday, March 2, 2026.
This it is.
And the mission for this deep dive is to sift through what can really only be described as a historically chaotic, incredibly heavy week of global news.
Extremely heavy.
We are going to extract the vital facts from a mountain of international reporting today. And importantly, we are going to do it without that overwhelming hyper-partisan shouting that usually accompanies these kinds of geopolitical earthquakes.
That is a vital distinction to make right at the top.
Yeah.
We are looking at a massive, rapidly escalating military conflict in the Middle East involving the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Right.
The implications of this are going to touch literally everything, from international security architecture to, honestly, the cost of the energy you use to heat your home.
Exactly.
And because of the gravity of that, we really need to be incredibly disciplined about how we approach the data today.
I am so glad you brought that up, because before we get into the actual details of the strikes, we have to establish the ground rules for how we are analyzing this material.
Yes, let us set the baseline.
We are drawing from a very wide array of news outlets today. We are looking at reporting from multiple countries, encompassing diverse political viewpoints, and that spans both left-wing and right-wing perspectives.
Exactly. And our baseline for this conversation is strict, objective, journalistic impartiality.
Always.
We will be presenting all sides of these events and all the domestic political reactions without any endorsement.
We aren't taking sides.
Right. We aren't here to validate the political rhetoric of any specific administration, any lawmaker, or any military faction.
Our entire purpose is to impartially report the facts contained in the news data.
Giving you the analytical framework to understand the immense scope is what is actually happening on the ground.
So with that framework firmly in place, let us go straight into our first segment, global geopolitics and the Middle East escalation.
Let's do it.
The breaking news that is dominating literally every single outlet today is that the United States and Israel have launched a massive, coordinated, preemptive military campaign against Iran.
The operation is officially codenamed Operation Epic Fury.
Operation Epic Fury, right. And the sheer scale of the initial wave is just staggering.
It is unprecedented in recent memory.
The reporting indicates they simultaneously targeted approximately 30 different sites across Iran.
Yeah. And the word preemptive is doing a lot of heavy lifting in the official statements right now.
It really is.
The targeting itself is highly specific. When you look at the military analysis, hitting 30 distinct sites simultaneously requires an extraordinary level of logistical coordination.
And intelligence gathering, right?
Absolutely. These were not peripheral border outposts. The strikes hit major fortified military installations.
But there is one target that stands out above all the rest.
Yes. The most significant tactical decision is that they directly targeted the residence of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi.
Right in the capital.
Yes, right in the capital city of Tehran, Iran.
Let me stop you there. Because targeting the capital city, and specifically the residence of the president, that moves this entirely out of the realm of a proportional skirmish, doesn't it?
It completely rewrites the rules of engagement for this specific theater.
Wow.
By striking the presidential residence in Tehran, Iran, the U.S., and Israel, are sending a definitive, undeniable message that the leadership itself is no longer insulated.
The gloves are totally off.
Exactly. U.S. military officials highlighted the speed, the element of surprise, and the sheer violence of the action as the core components of the operation's success.
Overwhelming force.
It was designed to overwhelm air defenses before command and control could even mount a coordinated response.
And that leads to the most consequential outcome reported across all our sources today, the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
He was 86 years old.
State media in Iran has officially confirmed his death. They are reporting that his body was recovered from the rubble of his compound.
We really cannot overstate what a monumental paradigm-shifting event this is.
Because he has been there forever.
Ayatollah Khamenei has not just been a political figure. He has been the absolute supreme leader since 1989.
That is nearly 4 decades.
Right. For almost 40 years, he has been the ultimate unquestioned authority in Iran. He shaped the country's strict domestic religious laws. He controlled the armed forces.
On the foreign policy.
Yes, he was the primary architect of a foreign policy defined by deep structural hostility toward the United States and Israel.
So his sudden death does not just remove a leader. It essentially shatters the foundational pillar of the entire state structure.
He really goes.
What happens to that power vacuum now?
Well, the reporting notes that a 3-member council has reportedly been formed to oversee the transition.
Okay.
But historically speaking, when a decades-long authoritarian leader is removed violently and suddenly, the internal transition is rarely smooth.
Right, there's usually a scramble.
The potential for severe factional infighting is incredibly high right now. You have the clerical establishment on one side, and then you have the incredibly powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, on the other.
So how those factions navigate this vacuum will completely determine the future of the country. From the U.S. perspective, the messaging from the executive branch has been uncharacteristically blunt.
Very blunt.
Our data indicates that U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed the death in a national address.
Yes, he did.
He stated that these strikes were absolutely necessary to remove what he called an existential threat.
And to defend the American people.
Right. And this military action comes immediately following the complete breakdown of the nuclear talks.
The talks that have been taking place in Geneva, Switzerland.
Exactly.
The breakdown of those talks in Geneva, Switzerland is the crucial context here. It represents the total collapse of the diplomatic track.
The diplomacy failed, so they moved to force.
And the rhetoric from the U.S. administration marks a profound escalation. President Trump did not just defend the tactical strikes.
No, he went further.
The reporting shows he explicitly called for regime change. He actively encouraged the Iranian people to use this moment of chaos to, in his exact words, take back their country.
I mean, I hear the strategic logic from the administration's point of view, but does not actively calling for a civilian uprising during a massive military bombardment carry massive risks?
It is a high-stakes gamble. By openly calling for regime change, the administration is shifting from a decades-long policy of containment to one of active destabilization.
Trying to force a revolution.
Right. However, military analysts in our reporting point out a historical paradox here.
What is that?
Military action of this nature often yields unpredictable psychological results.
How so?
Well, rather than fracturing the regime and inciting a democratic revolution, a massive foreign bombardment can sometimes cause a fractured populace and the military to actually rally around the flag.
Oh, against the perceived external invader.
Exactly. It can unify them in opposition.
Well, we certainly did not have to wait long to see the military response from them. The retaliation was almost instantaneous.
It's very fast.
We are seeing a massive coordinated response from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Yes. The IRGC immediately vowed to initiate what their communiques called the most ferocious counter-operation in history.
And they executed on that threat without hesitation.
They launched unprecedented waves of ballistic missiles and suicide drones directly at Israeli targets.
The geographic spread of this retaliation is what is truly alarming in the reporting today.
It is extensive.
According to the data, this included heavy strikes on the Tel Nof Air Base, which is a critical installation.
Right.
They hit military sites in the northern city of Haifa, Israel.
And they went further south.
They aimed rockets directly at the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv, Israel.
And that strike aimed at Tel Aviv, Israel, specifically targeting the Prime Minister's office, that mirrors the U.S. and Israeli strike on the Iranian presidential residence perfectly.
It is an attempted decapitation strike.
Yes. The IRGC official statements referred to his office using highly inflammatory, religiously charged language.
Which underscores the deep existential animosity driving this whole exchange.
This is not just about destroying military hardware anymore. It is about eliminating leadership on both sides.
And the conflict did not stay contained to Israel, which is the really scary part.
No, it spread immediately.
It spilled over into the broader Gulf region. The IRGC systematically targeted U.S. military installations across several allied Gulf Arab nations.
This took the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet Base.
Located in Manama, Bahrain.
Right.
And we have urgent reports of facilities being targeted in Kuwait, in Doha, Qatar, and in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates.
This is where the severe vulnerability of the global security architecture is totally exposed.
Because of our troop presence.
There are tens of thousands of U.S. troops stationed across these Gulf nations.
Yeah.
When the IRGC targets these bases, they're doing two things simultaneously.
Okay, what is the first?
First, they're obviously threatening American lives and military hardware. But second, and perhaps more strategically, they are violently testing the security alliances between the United States and these Gulf nations.
Because if you are the government of Qatar or the UAE, you suddenly have a giant target on your back simply for hosting an American base.
Precisely. The strike in Manama, Bahrain is particularly sensitive.
Why is that one so important?
Because the Fifth Fleet is the central nervous system for maritime security in the entire region.
Ah, I see.
Disrupting operations there severely degrades the ability to protect international shipping lanes.
Which we will discuss the economic impact of very shortly.
Yes, it is massive.
But it gets darker, unfortunately. It is not just fortified military bases taking hits.
No.
The reporting contains deeply alarming footage and on-the-ground reports of strikes hitting purely civilian areas.
This is a major escalation.
One of the most shocking reports is a direct strike that hit the Fairmont, the Palm Hotel in Dubai, United Arab Emirates.
Luxury resort.
Exactly, a luxury resort in an area that the world previously considered a completely safe haven for international tourists and global business.
The footage is just terrifying.
Smoke and flames pouring out of that structure.
The targeting of a civilian luxury hotel in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, marks a very, very dangerous blurring of the lines of conflict.
You think it was intentional?
This was not a stray missile. Analysts suggest it is a highly calculated move.
Why strike a hotel?
It introduces a level of profound economic and psychological warfare. Dubai relies entirely on its reputation as a safe, stable hub for global finance and tourism.
So if you shatter that illusion of safety...
Exactly. By striking a symbol of luxury there, the goal is to destabilize the perception of safety and trigger massive capital flight away from the region.
Wow. And the immediate logistical fallout is immense.
Commercial airspace is a mess.
It has been completely closed across 8 different countries right now, including Iraq, Jordan, and Qatar.
Airlines are scrambling.
Planes are being grounded, and global flight routes are being drastically redirected midair.
It is chaos up there.
Furthermore, the IRGC is officially claiming that their initial salvos have inflicted 200 U.S. military casualties.
But we need to be careful with those numbers.
Yes, I should absolutely note that the U.S. Department of Defense has not confirmed those numbers. This remains a highly fluid, ongoing battlefield situation.
Regarding those casualty claims, it is really essential to apply critical media literacy right now.
Right.
In the immediate fog of war, casualty numbers are routinely inflated or obscured by all sides.
For propaganda and morale purposes.
Exactly. It is going to take significant time for independent third-party verification of the actual human cost of this escalation.
Okay, let us look at the political balance and global reactions now. And again, keeping strictly to our directive to remain impartial and just report the perspectives laid out in the data.
Absolutely.
In the United States, the domestic political reaction is severely, almost instantly divided.
A deep split.
On one side, the Trump administration and its allies frame this operation as a necessary, legally justified, preemptive defense measure against a hostile state planning imminent attacks.
Right. The executive branch's position relies on the inherent authority to defend national security assets and personnel.
However, on the other side of the aisle, Democratic lawmakers are pushing back with immense force.
They are demanding an immediate war powers vote in Congress.
Yes. Their perspective, as detailed in the reporting, condemns these strikes as unauthorized acts of war.
They argue that the executive branch has initiated a massive regional military campaign without the constitutionally required congressional approval or oversight.
This touches on a debate that goes all the way back to the founding of the country, doesn't it?
It really does. It is the fundamental tension of the war powers resolution.
Right.
It is the ongoing constitutional debate over the legislature's exclusive power to declare war versus the executive's role as commander-in-chief.
To command the armed forces in response to perceived imminent threats.
Exactly. And this domestic political fracture will severely complicate any long-term U.S. strategy in the region.
Moving internationally, the reactions are incredibly complex and honestly very self-serving.
Geopolitics usually is.
Let us look at Moscow. We have Russian military and geopolitical analysts suggesting that this entire Middle Eastern inferno actually works to Russia's distinct advantage.
Regarding their ongoing war in Ukraine,
Yes, exactly.
it is a deeply cynical but geopolitically sound analysis from their perspective.
How does a war in the Middle East help Russia?
Well, a massive multi-front conflict in the Middle East instantly diverts U.S. and Western attention. It diverts military hardware, intelligence assets, and crucially, financial aid away from Eastern Europe.
It stretches Western logistical capabilities incredibly thin.
Moscow views a distracted and overextended United States as a massive net positive for its own strategic objectives in Ukraine.
Wow. Meanwhile, in Europe, the response is one of sheer panic.
Understandably so.
French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot gave an impassioned plea, practically begging for Lebanon to be spared from this regional escalation.
Knowing how fragile the political and economic stability of that country already is.
And in a much more aggressive posture, French President Emmanuel Macron announced an immediate increase in France's nuclear arsenal.
That is huge. Macron's announcement regarding the French nuclear arsenal is perhaps one of the starkest indicators of how destabilizing this event is perceived to be.
By global leaders, right.
It signals of a rapid shift towards self-reliance in European defense.
Because they are worried about the U.S.
Right. It is driven by a palpable fear that the post-World War II geopolitical order is fundamentally fracturing.
And the U.S. security umbrella might be compromised.
Exactly.
On top of all that, the United Nations Security Council has convened an emergency session in New York.
The UN Security Council meeting highlights the desperate, immediate need for diplomatic intervention.
But will it actually do anything?
Well, if we look at historical precedent, reaching any kind of actionable consensus or binding resolution among the veto-wielding members will be exceedingly difficult.
Especially with the U.S., Russia, and China holding vastly different strategic interests.
It might be nearly impossible.
Let us transition to the immediate economic shockwave. Because this is where a war halfway across the world reaches directly into the pocket of the listener.
This is where everyone feels it.
The moment the news of Operation Epic Fury broke, global energy markets essentially panicked.
They absolutely did.
Brent crude oil spiked 13% instantly,
hitting a 14-month high of $82 a barrel.
The speed of that market reaction is fascinating to me.
It really shows how rapidly geopolitical fear translates into hard economic reality.
Because the physical oil hasn't changed yet.
Exactly. That massive surge in oil prices is not about the physical oil currently being pumped out of the ground today.
It is about tomorrow.
It is entirely about the market pricing in the fear of what might happen to the global supply chain tomorrow morning.
And that fear is geographically centered on one very specific, very narrow piece of water.
Yes, the Strait of Hormuz.
For those unfamiliar, imagine a narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman.
At its narrowest point, it is barely 21 miles wide.
Barely 21 miles. And through this single, highly vulnerable choke point passes approximately 20% of the world's total daily oil supply.
So, with missiles flying across the Gulf, what happens to the ships?
With the military escalation, shipping in the strait has effectively frozen.
Massive supertankers are dropping anchor in safe waters, refusing to transit.
And it is not just fear of being hit by a rogue drone, is it?
No, it is basic economics.
The insurance!
The cost of maritime insurance premiums for a vessel entering a live war zone skyrockets.
To the point where the voyage is no longer economically viable.
The supply chain literally stops moving.
And it is not just crude oil. The reporting shows European natural gas prices surged by an astonishing 50%.
50% in one day.
This was the largest single-day jump since the initial energy crisis back in March 2022.
And this particular spike was triggered by a specific event.
Right, a drone strike that hit a massive Qatar Energy liquefied natural gas, or LNG, complex in Qatar.
That strike forced an immediate halt in production at a facility that Europe desperately relies on.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
This is the mechanism by which international conflict dictates daily domestic life.
It trickles down so fast.
When the Strait of Hormuz freezes and LNG complexes in Qatar are burning, global energy supplies constrict violently.
That 13% spike in crude oil and 50% spike in natural gas will rapidly trickle down through the entire global economy.
How fast does the average consumer feel that?
Usually within days to weeks. It means immediate higher prices at the gas pump for your daily commute.
It means your home heating and electricity bills are going to surge.
It means increased transportation and freight costs for every single consumer good sitting on a grocery store shelf.
Which ultimately drives up baseline inflation.
It is a textbook, real-time example of how fragile and interconnected our global economic lifelines truly are.
And the stock market understands this perfectly.
Which is why Dow futures plummeted by 500 points right out of the gate today.
That volatility in the Strait of Hormuz perfectly illustrates how fragile our earthly resources are.
It really does. And how much chaos ensues when a single choke point is threatened.
Which, frankly, makes it incredibly ironic that as humanity looks to solve these resource constraints by looking upward to space, we are already polluting the very atmosphere we are trying to escape into.
I suppose we take our problems with us wherever we go.
It is a profound irony.
It is. A shift in perspective is often necessary when the news on the ground is this heavy.
Definitely.
But as our news outlets indicate, our activities in orbit are beginning to reflect some of the exact same environmental negligence we have historically practiced right here on Earth.
That brings us perfectly into segment 2, space exploration.
And specifically, the dark side of this recent massive space boom.
We have all been marveling at the incredible cadence of rocket launches lately.
Satellite internet constellations going up weekly.
But there's a hidden atmospheric cost.
Let us look at this startling fact from the data. In February 2025, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket's upper stage made an uncontrolled re-entry into Earth's atmosphere.
And during that intense burnup process, it injected 30 kilograms of vaporized lithium directly into the upper atmosphere.
30 kilograms. That single event represents 10 times the typical daily atmospheric concentration of lithium.
This raises an incredibly important and honestly mostly ignored question about the environmental paradox of our modern commercial space age.
Right. On one hand, we rightly celebrate the deployment of these vast satellite networks.
They provide critical infrastructure, bringing high-speed internet access to deeply remote, underserved areas.
And they allow us to monitor Earth's changing climate with unprecedented precision.
The benefits are undeniable.
Oh.
But what happens when that hardware dies?
That is the issue. The overcrowding of low Earth orbit is creating a brand new category of pollution.
When these thousands of spacecraft and spent rocket stages reach the end of their lifespans, they inevitably fall back toward Earth.
They burn up upon re-entry.
But they do not just disappear. They vaporize, leaving behind massive trails of metallic ash.
Elements like lithium, aluminum, and other exotic alloys.
Suspended in the very delicate upper layers of our stratosphere and mesosphere.
Do we actually know what a massive influx of lithium does to the weather or the ozone layer up there?
We don't. And that is the terrifying part.
We are flying blind.
We are altering the baseline chemical composition of the upper atmosphere faster than atmospheric chemists can study the long-term thermodynamic or ozone-depleting consequences.
And it is not just chemical pollution. The reporting also details the literal brightening of the night sky.
Essentially turning night into day for astronomers.
The sheer volume of highly reflective, low-orbit satellites is starting to severely interfere with optical and radio astronomical research,
making it incredibly difficult for scientists to study the deep universe.
We are changing the visual and chemical landscape of the sky.
It requires a serious international conversation about regulation and sustainable practices in orbit.
Ensuring that our rush to commercialize the cosmos does not inadvertently damage the protective envelope of our own planet.
Speaking of exploring the cosmos, let us look at the efforts of NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Regarding their incredibly ambitious Lunar program?
It has been a week of major setbacks, but also some brilliant innovations.
Let us start with the setback. NASA has had to officially delay the Artemis II mission.
This is the highly anticipated, historic mission that will send a crew of 4 astronauts on a complex lunar flyby.
According to the reporting, they actually had to roll the massive SLS moon rocket all the way back to the Vehicle Assembly Building in Florida, United States.
To deal with necessary, critical repairs.
Delays of this magnitude are really frustrating for the public.
They are, but they are the stark reality of pushing the absolute boundaries of human spaceflight.
The Artemis architecture is exponentially more complex than the Apollo era.
There are thousands of points of failure. Prioritizing astronaut safety over strict adherence to a political or public relations timeline is always the correct engineering protocol.
Absolutely. But while the giant rocket is in the shop getting fixed, the innovation in the labs continues at a blistering pace.
Let us talk about the CARD project.
This is an initiative funded by NASA's Game-Changing Development Program.
They are utilizing a massive solar concentrator
Essentially, a highly advanced system of mirrors harnessing the raw power of the sun.
to extract oxygen from simulated lunar regolith.
And for you listening, regolith is the highly abrasive, dusty dirt that covers the surface of the moon.
In their recent tests, this solar process successfully generated carbon monoxide.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of deep space exploration, the CARD project is revolutionary.
This scientific process is known as in situ resource utilization, or ISRU.
Living off the land, basically.
Exactly. Right now, the gravitational math of spaceflight is brutal.
Every single ounce of breathable oxygen for the crew and every drop of heavy rocket propellant needed to get home.
Has to be launched from the bottom of Earth's gravity well.
Which is astronomically expensive.
If we can use a solar concentrator to literally bake breathable oxygen and chemical propellant right out of the dirt on the moon,
And eventually, out of the toxic atmosphere and soil of Mars.
it fundamentally alters the economics of space travel.
It drastically cuts the weight, cost, and complexity of deep space missions.
It is the technological bridge between merely visiting a new frontier and actually settling it.
That is incredible engineering.
It really is.
And here's another piece of brilliant incremental design from the reporting.
The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, recently completed a successful spaceflight test of something called the Additive Compliant Canister.
The JCC.
Right. It sounds highly technical, but it is essentially a 3D printed titanium spring, specifically designed for deploying space antennas.
It was tested in orbit on the Mercury 1 commercial spacecraft.
What makes this spring amazing is its efficiency. It expands from a tightly packed 1 inch to a full 6 inches.
And because it is 3D printed as a single continuous piece of titanium, it entirely cuts out the weight, cost, and mechanical complexity of traditional multi-part deployment mechanisms.
It is a perfect encapsulation of how additive manufacturing, what we commonly call 3D printing, is quietly revolutionizing aerospace engineering.
In the vacuum of space, traditional springs with interlocking parts can fail, right?
Yes, they can cold weld together, or they can snap under extreme temperature fluctuations.
So a single-piece titanium spring that deploys reliably is a massive win.
And again, every single gram of weight you save on a spacecraft translates to thousands of dollars in cost savings on the launch pad.
Let us wrap up this space segment by literally guiding the listener's eyes to the sky.
If you step outside tonight, assuming you have clear weather, we are currently experiencing a very rare astronomical event.
A parade of 6 planets.
Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus are all visibly aligned in a sweeping arc across the night sky.
And looking much further out into the dark, the GEOIS-E spacecraft has captured stunning, high-resolution new images of the Interstellar Comet designated 3IATLAS.
The images show off its vibrant, glowing coma and sweeping tail as it travels rapidly through our solar system.
It really is a beautiful, silent reminder of the wider universe out there.
It certainly puts our intense terrestrial and political concerns into perspective, if only for a brief moment.
It does, but, well, we have to come back down to Earth.
Back to the real world.
Or, at the very least, back down to our computer screens. Let us move into segment 3, technology, cybersecurity, and the AI evolution.
We are going to start with an invisible, silent war that has been raging right under our noses.
Inside the infrastructure we use every single day. Cisco, the massive global networking giant, revealed a critical vulnerability in their gear.
It is designated CVE 2023-2198.
And the genuinely terrifying detail in the reporting is that this bug has been actively, secretly exploited by hackers since 2023.
This is a textbook example of a catastrophic foundational infrastructure vulnerability.
We aren't talking about a bug in a smartphone app here.
No. Cisco routers and enterprise switches are quite literally the physical backbone of the internet and corporate networks globally.
When an unauthenticated vulnerability like this exists for years undetected, it allows attackers to create persistent, high-level administrative access.
It is essentially a master key left permanently under the doormat, of the world's most sensitive data centers.
To put that in perspective for you listening, this is not like someone picking the lock on your front door.
Well,
This is like the company that built the locks secretly keeping a master key for 3 years, and a foreign intelligence agency just found it lying in the street.
and we know exactly who found it.
A highly sophisticated threat actor known as Salt Typhoon.
Cybersecurity experts in the reporting state with high confidence that Salt Typhoon is operated directly by China's Ministry of State Security.
They weaponized this exact Cisco bug.
They used it to quietly infiltrate global telecom providers.
We are talking about the major players like Verizon and AT&T.
They gained unauthorized deep-level access and spent months siphoning off the call logs and text message metadata of over 1 million individual users.
What is fascinating here is analyzing the specific target. They weren't necessarily looking to steal credit card numbers for a quick financial payout.
Or to read the specific contents of your text messages to your family.
State-sponsored intelligence groups like Salt Typhoon are playing a decades-long game of strategic espionage.
They were after the metadata.
Let's unpack that. Why is metadata, just the timestamps and the who called who, so valuable to a foreign intelligence agency?
Because metadata is the raw material used to map invisible power structures.
They aren't reading the text. They're looking at who is texting whom at 3 a.m. during a geopolitical crisis.
If they map the metadata from AT&T and Verizon, they can build incredibly detailed relationship webs,
They can track the physical movements of government officials via cell tower pings,
identify hidden corporate hierarchies,
discover who journalists are talking to.
and build profiles for future blackmail, leverage, or intelligence gathering.
It is a massive, silent breach of structural privacy on a geopolitical scale.
Speaking of the intersection where geopolitics collides with technology, let us talk about the absolute explosion of artificial intelligence.
According to the data today, U.S. President Donald Trump has officially signed an executive order mandating all U.S. government agencies to completely halt the use of any AI technology developed by the company Anthropic.
This sweeping ban comes immediately after a highly publicized tense standoff between Anthropic executives and the Pentagon.
This specific event highlights a rapidly growing and severe ideological tension between private Silicon Valley AI firms and the traditional military-industrial complex.
Many foundational AI companies, and particularly their engineering workforces, operate under strict internal ethical guidelines.
Regarding how their powerful technology can be deployed,
These guidelines often explicitly prohibit the use of their AI in lethal weapon systems, mass surveillance, or specific military applications.
but the government obviously sees AI as the ultimate strategic high ground.
Exactly. The Department of Defense recognizes advanced AI not just as a tool, but as a critical, non-negotiable strategic asset for national defense and global supremacy.
When a prominent private company like Anthropic pushes back against the Pentagon on ethical grounds, it forces a massive reckoning.
The total government-wide ban enacted by the administration is a very strong punitive signal.
It tells the tech sector that the federal government expects total compliance and cooperation from foundational AI developers.
If those companies want to access lucrative federal contracts or operate within the government sphere.
It is a high-stakes standoff, for sure, and we will see how the tech sector responds.
But AI isn't just causing philosophical friction at the Pentagon. It is fundamentally changing the mechanics of how we work every single day.
Let us look at a new productivity tool from a company called Read AI. They just launched a product named Ada.
Ada is described as an email-based digital twin.
The pitch is, if you are overwhelmed at work, you simply CC Ada at read.ai on an email thread.
This AI then autonomously handles the back and forth of scheduling meetings.
And it can even retrieve complex information and answer queries from colleagues by semantically scanning your internal company databases.
The concept of a digital twin for knowledge workers is moving rapidly from speculative science fiction to practical, everyday reality.
We're moving far beyond the primitive AI that just helps you write a polite draft of an email.
Ada represents a class of AI that actively manages workflows, negotiates calendar availability with human beings autonomously, and acts as an intelligent, semantic search engine for your company's proprietary knowledge base.
The productivity gains seem massive, but doesn't that require handing over the keys to the kingdom?
That is the core trade-off. It requires a massive amount of institutional and personal trust.
You are granting a third-party AI system unfettered access to your private communications, your calendar, and your internal, potentially sensitive corporate data.
Which, if we loop right back to the cybersecurity segment we just discussed with Cisco and Salt Typhoon, creates a brand new, highly centralized attack vector for hackers to exploit.
Very true. You have to blindly trust the AI security protocols. And speaking of blind trust, how about trusting an AI algorithm to manage your love life?
Uh-huh. That's quite a pivot.
The dating app Bumble has just rolled out a comprehensive AI matchmaker to combat what they're diagnosing as Gen Z swiping fatigue.
But this AI doesn't just suggest matches. It actively analyzes a user's uploaded camera roll.
It gives critical feedback on the lighting, the angles, and your facial expressions to mathematically predict which photos will generate the highest match rate.
And taking it a step further, the AI will actively draft your personal bio for you.
Utilizing psychological frameworks based on attachment theory.
It is certainly an intriguing, if slightly dystopian, application of machine learning.
The dating app industry is currently struggling with severe user retention issues because the highly gamified nature of endless, superficial swiping has led to profound psychological burnout among young users.
So the solution to algorithmic burnout is more algorithms.
That appears to be Bumble's hypothesis.
By utilizing AI to optimize the visual presentation of profiles and craft bios based on established psychological frameworks, like attachment theory.
Which analyzes how people form emotional bonds.
The company is trying to engineer deeper, more meaningful romantic connections right from the very first interaction.
However, from a sociological standpoint, one really has to wonder if outsourcing your humor, your personality, and your vulnerability to a predictive algorithm might fundamentally defeat the entire purpose of authentic human connection.
Haha, I think we all know a few people whose AI bio would be a lot more charming than their actual personality.
That is the million-dollar question for the future of romance. And speaking of millions of dollars, let us look at the financial foundation of all this technology we've been discussing.
Open source software.
We are talking about the free, publicly available code that literally runs the modern world. Systems like Kubernetes, which manages global cloud computing.
And TensorFlow, which is the bedrock for modern AI research.
There is a brand new venture capital-backed initiative launching called the Open Source Endowment.
Their stated goal is to permanently solve the chronic funding crisis for open source developers.
Ensuring these brilliant coders aren't just relying on passing the hat for random donations on the internet.
This is a critically important, overdue development for the stability of the global tech ecosystem.
Historically, open source software has been the ultimate tragedy of the commons.
Massive, multi-billion-dollar corporations, banks, defense contractors, telecom giants build their entire digital infrastructure on top of code that is maintained by a handful of unpaid, anonymous volunteers.
Working on their laptops in their spare time, which sounds like a recipe for a catastrophic collapse.
It is a massive systemic security and stability risk. We've seen it happen with vulnerabilities like Log4j a few years ago.
The Open Source Endowment aims to treat foundational open source projects not as hobbyist clubs, but as critical global infrastructure.
By providing stable, predictable, and permanent financial endowments, it ensures that the invisible digital roads and bridges we all rely on every day don't suddenly collapse.
Just because a volunteer maintainer in Nebraska got burned out and stopped updating the code.
That makes incredible sense.
Now we're going to shift our focus again. We are moving into segment 4, climate, earth sciences, and human health.
We're going to start with some geology and ice, tying back to our earlier discussions about global fragility.
There is a deeply alarming new climate record emerging from Antarctica.
The Victoria Glacier, which is located on the highly vulnerable Antarctic Peninsula, has suffered a catastrophic collapse.
The data shows that in just 2 months, it retreated 8 kilometers and lost nearly 50% of its entire structural mass.
The sheer speed of this collapse is what has glaciologists globally so deeply concerned.
This was not a slow, century-long melt driven by gradually warming air temperatures.
It was a rapid, violent structural disintegration. And understanding the physical mechanics of how this happened is crucial for modeling our future.
How does half a glacier just vanish in 60 days?
The Victoria Glacier sits on a specific type of topography, a flat, underwater bedrock surface.
As global ocean currents warm, that relatively warmer water infiltrates beneath the leading edge of the glacier at a place called the grounding line.
Because the bedrock underneath is perfectly flat, rather than sloping upward, the warm water can penetrate deeply inward, essentially lifting the massive ice sheet right off the rock.
The ice begins to float.
And without the immense friction of the bedrock to anchor it and hold it back, the structural integrity fails.
The ice fractures, splinters, and breaks apart rapidly from below.
And when a massive land-based glacier like that shatters and dumps into the ocean, it immediately impacts global sea levels.
Exactly. The Hectoria Glacier itself is a localized contributor, but the real existential fear within the scientific community is the precedent.
This flat bedrock topography is common across much larger, infinitely more massive ice sheets in Antarctica, like the Thwaites Glacier.
If this rapid underwater fracture mechanism triggers in those larger systems, the current models for global sea level rise will have to be drastically revised upward.
That has profound, potentially devastating implications for coastal cities from Miami to Mumbai over the next few decades.
Just to note another active geological event in the global reporting today, there was also a brief mention of a sudden volcanic eruption in northern Colombia.
It forced immediate local evacuations of villages due to the sudden dangerous release of ash clouds and toxic sulfur fumes.
The Earth is definitely physically active right now. But let us bring the science much closer to home. Let us look inside your medicine cabinet.
We are going to talk about everyday human health and the hidden systemic risks of some very, very popular medications.
Specifically, acid reflux meds, medically known as proton pump inhibitors, or PPIs.
These are household brand names everyone knows: Prilosec, Nexium, Protonix.
PPIs have been an undeniably revolutionary class of drugs for treating gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD.
From a pharmacological standpoint, they work brilliantly. They irreversibly bind to and inhibit the proton pumps located in the stomach lining,
Drastically shutting down the biological production of gastric acid.
for the short-term healing of painful stomach ulcers or managing severe acute acid reflux. They are incredibly effective and bring massive relief to millions.
But the danger highlighted in the new data lies in chronic, long-term use.
According to comprehensive warnings from Yale Medicine and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, staying on these drugs for years drastically, permanently reduces your stomach acid.
And it turns out, evolutionarily speaking, you actually need that acid for more than just heartburn.
Without sufficient stomach acid, your body physically cannot absorb essential nutrients like vitamin B12 or dietary calcium properly.
This is a classic, dangerous cascade effect in long-term medicine.
When you chronically suppress stomach acid, the digestive system struggles to chemically cleave vitamin B12 from dietary proteins.
B12 is not a luxury. It is absolutely essential for red blood cell formation and central neurological health.
A chronic deficiency leads to severe fatigue, measurable cognitive decline, and potentially irreversible peripheral neuropathy.
And the calcium issue leads straight to bone health, right?
Precisely. The artificially reduced acidic environment severely impairs calcium absorption in the gut.
Over years of daily PPI use, this directly contributes to severe osteoporosis and a statistically significant increased risk of major bone fractures.
This is especially dangerous considering the elderly population are the primary long-term users of these medications.
Furthermore, the reporting notes that chronic, decade-long PPI use has now been strongly linked to an increased risk of developing chronic kidney disease.
Then the most shocking statistic from the clinical study is that an estimated 70% of these long-term daily prescriptions actually lack sufficient medical justification.
If the risks are this severe, why are doctors prescribing them so ubiquitously?
It is a combination of systemic inertia and patient demand.
A patient comes in with heartburn, they get a 30-day script, it works perfectly, and then it simply gets refilled automatically for years.
Without a doctor ever reassessing if the underlying dietary or lifestyle causes have changed.
People are just staying on them indefinitely as a preventative crutch, entirely without realizing the silent, systemic, long-term damage they might be causing to their bones and brain.
It is a wake-up call to review your prescriptions.
And it is not just prescription meds causing unintended consequences. Let us look at the booming supplement industry.
A massive new epidemiological study involving 270,000 participants looked closely at tyrosine.
Tyrosine is a very popular, widely available amino acid supplement. It is heavily marketed to biohackers and students to boost brain power, alertness, and intense focus.
But the study linked high, sustained levels of tyrosine in the blood to a reduced overall lifespan in men by almost a full year.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why would an amino acid supplement that is naturally supposed to help build dopamine, the focus chemical, actually disrupt your body's systems enough to shorten your life?
It is a fantastic question that highlights the danger of reductionist biology.
Tyrosine is indeed a vital precursor to crucial neurotransmitters like dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine.
That is exactly why it is marketed for cognitive enhancement and stress resistance.
However, amino acids in the human body do not operate in a neat, isolated vacuum.
They compete with each other.
Exactly. They compete for absorption across the blood-brain barrier.
When you voluntarily flood your digestive system with isolated, artificially high-dose tyrosine pills, you can severely disrupt the delicate, evolved metabolic balance of the entire body.
Tyrosine is deeply involved in various complex biological signaling pathways, including regulating thyroid function and cellular growth factors.
Chronic excessive levels might overstimulate certain metabolic pathways, accelerating cellular aging, or it might create severe imbalances by blocking the absorption of other essential amino acids.
And what about the fact that it specifically impacted men's lifespans more severely?
The fact that the study found a distinct sex-specific dimension, reducing lifespan in men by a year while showing different metrics for women, suggests highly complex hormonal or metabolic interactions that modern medicine simply does not fully map or understand yet.
It is a powerful empirical reminder that in human biology, more is not always better.
Isolating single nutrients into high dose, daily pills to chase a quick cognitive high can have deeply unintended, life-shortening consequences down the line.
That is a very sobering thought to keep in mind the next time you browse the brightly colored bottles in the supplement aisle.
All right, let us move into our final section, Segment 5, Global Economics and Society.
We are starting in the United Kingdom with a political earthquake of their own.
There was a special by-election held in the parliamentary constituency of Gorton and Denton, United Kingdom.
And the left-wing Green Party, represented by candidate Hannah Spencer, pulled off a genuinely stunning upset, winning the seat outright with 40.7% of the total vote.
To truly understand the magnitude of this political upset, you have to look at the deep electoral history of the region.
The Gorton and Denton constituency has been an absolute impenetrable stronghold for the Labour Party for nearly a century.
It is their heartland. In the recent 2024 general election, Labour won this exact seat easily, with over 50% of the vote.
For a smaller third party like the Greens to sweep in and completely flip a deeply entrenched, historic stronghold is a seismic event in modern British politics.
And the data shows it gets significantly worse for Labour. They did not just lose by a narrow margin, the coalition collapsed.
The Labour Party fell to an embarrassing third place, capturing only 25.4% of the vote.
They are actually beaten for second place by Nigel Farage's right-wing Reform UK party, which surged to take 28.7%.
This specific electoral result is a massive, multifaceted blow to the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
It vividly demonstrates a severe, rapid fracturing of the broad Labour coalition that put him in power.
Why are they bleeding voters so heavily from both sides?
It is a classic centrist squeeze. Voters on the progressive left who are deeply dissatisfied with Starmer's moderate centrist leadership, his economic policies, and his stance on international issues are migrating aggressively to the Green Party, seeking a purely progressive alternative.
Simultaneously, working-class voters in the same district, who are primarily concerned about domestic issues like immigration and economic stagnation, are migrating to the populist right with Reform UK.
It leaves the Labour Party completely squeezed and hollowed out in the middle.
And this specific three-way split is reigniting a massive structural debate over the UK's voting system itself, isn't it?
Yes. It is throwing gasoline on the debate over the UK's first past the post-voting system.
In political science, there's a concept called Duverger's law, which states that first-past-the-post systems naturally, inevitably favor a two-party duopoly.
But critics argue that in today's deeply fragmented political landscape, where you essentially have 4 or 5 parties with significant, dedicated national support, the old system is buckling.
Because you can win all the power with a minority of the actual vote.
Precisely. A system where the winner simply needs one more vote than the runner-up, even if that winner only gets 30 or 40% of the total vote, fails to accurately represent the true proportional will of the majority of the electorate.
When the vote splits 3 or 4 ways, the parliament no longer reflects the populace.
It is a mathematical reality that is going to force a reckoning for the established legacy parties in the United Kingdom.
Moving from political accountability to corporate accountability, let us look at a major story regarding labor rights.
The retail giant Walmart has just agreed to a massive $100 million financial settlement with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB.
This penalty was levied over deceptive pay practices deeply embedded within their gig economy delivery platform, the Spark Driver program.
The reporting alleges the drivers were systematically coerced into using a specific proprietary payment processing partner called Branch Messenger.
By being forced into that specific app, the drivers incurred over $10 million in hidden withdrawal and transfer fees that quietly, continuously reduced their actual base pay.
This $100 million settlement is a landmark moment in the ongoing global struggle to effectively regulate the modern gig economy.
For the past decade, massive corporations have eagerly utilized millions of independent contractors specifically to reduce their overhead, avoid paying benefits, and bypass traditional labor laws.
But the CFPB stepping in shows that the government isn't completely asleep at the wheel regarding these new financial models.
Exactly. The CFPB is sending a very loud, expensive signal to the corporate sector that utilizing independent contractors does not exempt a company from adhering to fair labor standards and enforcing transparent financial practices.
Coercing gig workers, who are already operating on razor-thin margins, into proprietary financial ecosystems that quietly siphon off their hard-earned wages via obscured, hidden fees is an exploitative practice.
Regulators are demonstrating they are increasingly willing to penalize this heavily.
It forces a much-needed, broader conversation about the equitable treatment and financial protection of the modern, decentralized labor force.
And finally today, our data indicates that the ongoing societal cleanup and the legal fallout regarding the disgraced late financier Jeffrey Epstein is continuing to make international headlines, demanding retroactive accountability at the absolute highest levels of global society.
Yes. Keeping strictly to the facts provided in the reporting today, we see continued severe repercussions across multiple distinct spheres of global influence.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton recently testified behind closed doors to the House Oversight Committee.
In her recorded testimony, she categorically denied having any personal knowledge of Epstein's crimes, and she actively instructed the Congressional Committee that they should be focusing their time on questioning President Donald Trump regarding his well-documented past social associations with Epstein.
The news outlets also detail that billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates, in a recent interview, publicly admitted to having personal affairs during his marriage, but he strongly, emphatically denied any involvement in the illicit activities, financial irregularities, or crimes associated with Epstein's network.
And the fallout isn't just American. In the world of international economics, Borge Brenda has officially resigned from his incredibly powerful position as CEO of the World Economic Forum, the WEF, based in Davos, Switzerland.
This high-profile resignation came immediately after newly revealed documents highlighted his past, undisclosed dinners, and communications with Epstein.
Framing these specific events impartially, what we are observing is an ongoing, systemic societal reckoning.
The gradual, relentless exposure of Epstein's vast network continues to act as an unprecedented stress test for accountability among the global elite.
Whether we are looking at domestic partisan politics, global philanthropy, or international economic forums in Davos, Switzerland, past associations with Epstein, even peripheral ones, are increasingly viewed as toxic liabilities.
They require immediate public clarification, formal congressional investigation, or, as in the case of the WEF, outright resignation.
It is a fascinating story of societal and ethical boundaries being aggressively redrawn and enforced retroactively.
I think reckoning is the exact right word for it, and that brings us to the end of our data stack today.
To synthesize this deep dive,
Yeah.
the sheer staggering scale of what we have covered over the last hour is almost dizzying to process.
We started with the immense, terrifying fragility of international borders, watching a massive, preemptive military strike upend the leadership in Iran and instantly send shockwaves through the global oil markets via a 21-mile choke point in the Strait of Hormuz.
We looked at the structural fragility of the ancient ice in Antarctica as the Hectoria Glacier collapses from below.
And we even examined the chemical fragility of the literal atmosphere above us as commercial rockets leave permanent trails of vaporized lithium in our skies.
And that profound interconnectedness is the core takeaway for you, the listener.
It is incredibly easy to view these stories in isolation as just separate headlines scrolling past on a screen.
But whether it is the complex geopolitical chess game in the Middle East that directly dictates the price of your commute to work, the digital twin AI that is suddenly reading your corporate emails and mapping your schedule, or the daily antacids sitting quietly in your bathroom cabinet that might be blocking your brain from absorbing nutrients, staying truly informed is about recognizing how deeply intertwined all these seemingly invisible systems truly are.
Understanding the mechanics of one system drastically helps you navigate the vulnerabilities of the others.
Everything touches everything else. There are no isolated events anymore.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We just spent time discussing how a single undetected line of code, a bug in a Cisco router, allowed foreign state actors to silently siphon the private data of millions of people for years without anyone noticing.
We also talked about how a brilliantly simple 1-inch 3D printed titanium spring could fundamentally revolutionize human communications on the moon.
As we build AI that perfectly mimics our psychological attachment theories, and as we fire thousands of commercial rockets that leave lithium floating in the stratosphere, are we advancing our technological capabilities significantly faster than our collective wisdom can govern them?
Think about that the next time you step outside in the dark to look up at that beautiful six-planet parade.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will catch you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are analyzing the unprecedented geopolitical and, well, economic shockwaves currently reverberating across the globe following Operation Epic Fury. That is the joint United States and Israeli military strikes on Iran. This preemptive campaign has resulted in the death of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and triggered immediate widespread retaliatory missile strikes from Iran across the Middle East.
Right. And we are drawing on comprehensive global reporting from international outlets to make sense of this. We're looking at coverage from Al Jazeera, Bloomberg, the South China Morning Post, RT, Telesur, and France 24 to really understand the worldwide implications.
Exactly. The central question before us today is this. Does this military campaign represent a necessary strategic intervention that will ultimately neutralize a severe threat and stabilize global markets, or does it constitute a catastrophic overreach that irreparably damages the international economy and accelerates a fractured, multipolar world?
It's a massive question.
It is. I will be arguing that these strikes are a necessary, decisive action to dismantle a destabilizing nuclear and military threat, and that global markets possess the structural resilience to weather this short-term volatility.
And I will be arguing that this campaign is a reckless escalation triggering a worldwide economic crisis. By effectively weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz, this action diplomatically alienates the global south and actively accelerates the rise of alternative, non-Western global powers.
To begin, we really have to view these joint U.S.-Israeli strikes as a fundamentally justified defensive measure. We are dealing with a regime that has continually threatened regional stability and global security through extensive proxy wars and unchecked nuclear ambitions. For decades, the geopolitical consensus has recognized the severe systemic risk posed by Iran's military apparatus. By taking decisive action now, the U.S. and Israel are forcing a correction that diplomacy alone has completely failed to achieve.
A correction, but at what cost to the rest of the world?
The cost is real, but manageable. We are already seeing evidence of profound market resilience that supports this strategic calculation. The U.S. dollar, the Japanese yen, and the Swiss franc have all surged as safe haven assets. This demonstrates that underlying confidence in the U.S.-led financial system remains incredibly robust during times of crisis. Furthermore, Iran's internal fragility, which is marked by a severe, prolonged economic crisis and widespread popular protests, well, it presents a unique strategic opportunity here. This is a moment to reshape the Middle East for long-term commercial and diplomatic stability.
Reshape it or shatter it entirely?
Look at the international coordination. It's deeply significant. Key Western allies, such as the United Kingdom, have supported the effort by allowing the use of their military bases for these operations. Even within Israel's highly fractured domestic political landscape, opposition leaders like Yair Lapid have united behind the government, explicitly calling this a just war. The intervention, while forceful, is a calculated application of hard power designed to secure long-term global stability.
I come at it from a different way. This intervention is an illegal and fundamentally destabilizing shock to the entire global system. It's already triggering immediate economic trauma and alienating vast portions of the globe. We cannot casually dismiss the immediate worldwide economic fallout as mere short-term volatility.
But markets always react to kinetic military action. That's a reflex, not a permanent state.
It's more than a reflex when the physical infrastructure of global trade is paralyzed. Within hours of the strikes, Brent crude prices jumped by up to 14%. European benchmark natural gas spiked by an astonishing 50% in a single day. Watching those European natural gas numbers spike 50% in 24 hours gave me absolute whiplash. It immediately brought to mind the 1970s oil shocks, but on fast forward. The Strait of Hormuz, a vital maritime artery responsible for 20% of the world's global oil supply, is effectively paralyzed right now, with major shipping companies entirely halting transit.
Which is painful, yes, but temporary.
Temporary is a very dangerous assumption when we are witnessing sweeping international condemnation that extends far beyond the immediate region. We are seeing strong, unified rebukes from Russia and China, as well as from leaders across Latin America. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro explicitly condemned the military aggression, underscoring a broader sentiment in the global South. This action doesn't secure global stability. It isolates the United States and Israel on the world stage, accelerating the transition away from a unipolar U.S.-led order and pushing the international economy toward a precipice.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the economic realities of this situation. While it is true that oil may temporarily push toward the $80 to $100 a barrel threshold, we must recognize that modern global markets are highly adaptive.
But adaptive how? You can't just innovate your way out of a closed maritime choke point overnight.
You don't have to innovate. You utilize existing buffers. The initial shock to Brent crude and natural gas is a reflexive market pricing of risk. It is not a permanent structural deficit. China, for instance, possesses massive strategic oil reserves and has the logistical and diplomatic channels to lean heavily on Russia to bridge any temporary supply gaps. Furthermore, the OPEC Plus consortium retains significant spare capacity, literally millions of barrels a day, to increase production and stabilize the global energy supply if prices remain elevated.
But that assumes OPEC Plus actually wants to open the taps to bail out a Western military intervention. Historically, their interests don't align that neatly with Washington's.
They align with making money, and capitalizing on market share is a powerful incentive. But let's look at the currency markets, because the surge in the US dollar is incredibly telling here. It's the ultimate irony of global finance. Even when the US triggers the geopolitical crisis, the world's panic response is to buy US debt. That capital flight to the US dollar, the yen, and the franc proves that global investors still view the Western financial architecture as the ultimate guarantor of worldwide economic stability. The disruption is real, but the macroeconomic system is engineered to absorb it.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the cascading effects of supply chain paralysis that extend far beyond the immediate price of a barrel of crude? We are not just talking about abstract commodities trading here. We are talking about catastrophic physical supply chain disruptions.
Which sector specifically are you looking at?
All of them that rely on that airspace and those waters. Oil tankers have already been damaged in the Gulf. Global aviation is in absolute chaos. Thousands of canceled flights have effectively cut off the Middle East from the rest of the world, severing a critical hub between Asian and European markets. The disruption is so profound that Chinese technology firms such as Baidu and WeRide have been forced to completely halt their autonomous and tech operations in Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Tech operations halting in a conflict zone is standard risk management, not a structural collapse.
But it illustrates how deeply integrated these markets are, and the macroeconomic models are flashing red. If we see a sustained $10 per barrel increase in oil prices, models suggest this could reduce global GDP by 0.2 to 0.3 percentage points. To put that in perspective for our listeners, a 0.2% drop in global GDP isn't just a rounding error. That's equivalent to wiping out the entire economic output of a medium-sized country overnight, driven entirely by energy inflation.
It's a contraction, certainly.
It's a contraction that will disproportionately devastate energy-dependent Asian economies, nations like India, Japan, and South Korea, while simultaneously exacerbating the global inflation crisis that central banks have spent the last 3 years trying to tame. You argue the system can absorb this, but the data indicates we are pushing the worldwide economy into a synchronized downturn.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz will be permanent or unmanageable. The paralysis of the strait is a tactical reality of the immediate conflict, but history shows that maritime corridors reopen because it is in the absolute economic interest of all regional actors to keep the oil flowing. A sustained closure of the strait would bankrupt Tehran just as swiftly as it would harm those energy-dependent Asian economies you mentioned.
But Tehran isn't exactly making purely economic decisions right now. They are in a fight for regime survival.
Exactly, which is why dismantling the regime that systematically utilizes its energy wealth to fund proxy wars and destabilize international commerce is the ultimate goal here. The economic pain is acute right now, yes, but it serves a strategic purpose. By neutralizing the leadership that orchestrates these disruptions, we are ultimately securing the very supply chains you are concerned about. We are removing the actor that constantly threatens to close the strait.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The strategy of using hard power to enforce stability ignores the diplomatic reality that this strike has shattered international norms and actively empowered a multipolar resistance. This isn't just about economics anymore. It's about the rapid, real-time realignment of global diplomacy.
But diplomatic realignment happens all the time. It doesn't mean the new alignment is stronger than the old one.
It does when it represents the majority of the global population. China has firmly condemned this violation of sovereignty and publicly vowed to maintain pragmatic, enduring economic ties with Iran. They are not stepping away. They are leaning in. And look at Latin America, which is demonstrating an incredibly unified resistance to this intervention. Latin America's left-leaning governments often criticize U.S. foreign policy. That isn't new. It's the degree of coordination that's new. Cuba is receiving Mexican naval aid amid the crisis. Argentina is increasing its border security. Colombia's President Petro is leading a moral condemnation of the aggression from the global south. What the U.S. and Israel have done here is provide the exact catalyst needed to solidify an alternative bloc of global powers. From Beijing to Moscow to Bogota, they view Washington not as a guarantor of security, but as an unpredictable aggressor.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The international friction you are describing is certainly real. I won't dispute that. Nations are angry. But transactional diplomacy often requires the application of hard power to enforce red lines.
So you're saying the anger of the global south is just the cost of doing business?
I'm saying that when a state actor crosses the threshold of developing unchecked nuclear capabilities and orchestrating regional terror, diplomatic norms must sometimes be ruptured to prevent a far worse outcome. The responses from Russia and China are largely opportunistic rather than deeply ideological. They are seizing a geopolitical moment to criticize the West, but they are absolutely not prepared to replace the security umbrella the U.S. provides. Who else is going to police the global sea lanes? Beijing? Moscow? They rely on the U.S. Navy to keep international waters open just as much as Europe does.
For now. But they are actively building alternative trade routes and financial systems, specifically because of actions like Epic Fury.
Even so, look at the domestic response within the United States. There is profound structural support for enforcing global security. Despite a deeply split Congress and a highly vocal, non-interventionist MAGA wing within the Republican Party, these strikes have garnered significant bipartisan Republican support. This demonstrates an enduring, structural consensus within the U.S. establishment that maintaining international security occasionally demands decisive, preemptive military action.
But the decisive military action you're praising is precisely what is plunging the Middle East into an uncontainable regional war. The assertion that removing Ayatollah Khamenei will somehow neatly resolve the systemic issues in the Middle East is fundamentally flawed.
It removes the central architect of the chaos.
And replaces him with what? We are already seeing the blowback. Iran has not capitulated. They have launched massive retaliatory strikes, hitting Israel and targeting U.S. assets across the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait. This is no longer a contained surgical operation, and the U.S. is fracturing its own domestic stability in the process. We are seeing massive protests erupting in Times Square. Democrats in Congress are demanding immediate war powers votes to rein in the executive branch. You speak of securing global stability, but what we are witnessing is the destruction of infrastructure and the ignition of an unwinnable, protracted conflict that draws in multiple sovereign nations.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the strategic long game here. The elimination of Supreme Leader Khamenei creates an unprecedented leadership vacuum.
Which is historically a terrifying thing in the Middle East.
It's a risk, but also an opportunity. For decades, the Iranian regime has maintained its grip through an ironclad theological and military hierarchy. Disrupting that hierarchy creates the conditions for genuine regime change from within, driven by the Iranian people themselves, who have been protesting their government's economic mismanagement for years.
You can't bomb a country into a democratic transition.
You can remove the oppressors preventing one. While the short-term retaliatory strikes across the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait are severe, they represent the desperate thrashing of a decapitated command structure, not a sustainable military campaign. If we look beyond the immediate horizon, a post-Khamenei Iran presents an extraordinary opportunity for the global economy.
An opportunity?
Yes, a massive one. Think about an Iran that eventually opens up to Western investment, tapping into its vast oil and gas reserves. It could trigger a commercial bonanza. It could reintegrate a highly educated, youthful population into the global economy, fundamentally transforming the Middle East from a zone of perpetual conflict into a hub of commercial and diplomatic stability.
I have to stop you there. A commercial bonanza built on the ashes of a preemptive war is a deeply perilous fantasy. That narrative completely ignores the realities of modern warfare and societal collapse.
I'm looking at the demographics of Iran. The youth want economic integration.
But power vacuums in the Middle East do not historically lead to peaceful democratic transitions and foreign direct investment. Look at the history here. They lead to protracted civil wars, the rise of more extreme militant factions, and decades of regional instability. Look at Iraq. Look at Libya. By assassinating the head of state, the U.S. and Israel have completely validated the hardliners in Tehran, who have always argued that the West seeks nothing short of their total destruction.
The hardliners were already in control.
And now they have a mandate for total war. The retaliatory strikes hitting American bases and Gulf Arab states prove that the Revolutionary Guard retains immense operational capacity. Furthermore, the idea that the Iranian populace will embrace the nations bombing their cities is psychologically and historically unsound. Think about the history here. The idea that the Iranian people are going to welcome the very nations dropping bombs on their cities with open arms, it just doesn't hold up. This intervention doesn't build a bridge to commercial integration, it detonates it, while simultaneously pushing the worldwide economy toward a recession due to the sustained weaponization of energy corridors.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes the Iranian populace equates the regime with the nation.
They equate falling bombs with foreign aggression.
The reporting clearly shows deep internal dissatisfaction with a government that has prioritized regional proxy wars over domestic prosperity. By neutralizing the chief architect of that policy, the strikes offer a structural reset. Yes, the immediate term is fraught with risk, but the alternative, allowing a hostile actor to operate with impunity and hold the global energy market hostage through the constant threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz, was an unacceptable baseline. The targeted application of military force, supported by intelligence and allied cooperation, is a painful but necessary recalibration of the global security architecture.
But the recalibration you're talking about has entirely bypassed the international consensus. You mentioned allied cooperation earlier, citing the UK allowing the use of its bases. I won't dispute that London is on board, but calling that global allied cooperation is a massive stretch when the entirety of the Global South is condemning this. The resistance we are seeing from the Global South is not just opportunistic rhetoric. It is a structural rejection of unilateral military intervention.
A rejection in tone, perhaps, but not in actionable policy.
Is absolutely bleeding into policy. When nations like China, Russia, and the leading economies of Latin America unite in their condemnation, they are signaling a shift away from a dollar-dominated U.S. police global order. They are actively pursuing alternative financial systems, alternative energy trade routes, and alternative diplomatic forums. The strikes on Iran may be viewed in Washington and Tel Aviv as a necessary security measure, but from Beijing, Moscow, and Bogota, they are viewed as the dying gasps of an imperial overreach. This action accelerates the very multipolar world the U.S. is trying to manage.
To summarize my position, in light of our discussion today, the joint strikes, while undeniably disruptive to short-term international economics, represent a necessary hard power correction. We are dealing with a systemic threat that has consistently destabilized global security. The resilience of safe haven currencies, the adaptive capacity of global oil markets, and the potential to replace a hostile regime with a framework for long-term commercial and diplomatic integration justify the immediate costs. True macroeconomic stability sometimes requires confronting the actors who seek to dismantle it.
Means that this campaign is a disastrous overreach that inflicts immediate structural trauma on the global economy. The skyrocketing costs of crude oil and natural gas, the paralysis of vital logistics hubs from aviation to maritime shipping, and the deep alienation of the global south far outweigh any theoretical long-term gains. By choosing preemptive military action, the U.S. and Israel have fractured the global economy and isolated themselves against a rapidly solidifying multipolar consensus that rejects this brand of unilateral aggression.
We can certainly agree that the immediate future of the global economy hinges entirely on the developments surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. The flow of international energy through that specific maritime corridor remains the absolute fulcrum of this crisis.
Yes, we converge on that point completely. If that waterway remains closed, the theoretical debates about GDP won't matter. The practical reality of inflation will hit every continent. And we also agree that this event fundamentally accelerates the shifting of diplomatic alliances. The speed at which nations across Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East are reevaluating their diplomatic and economic partnerships in response to these strikes is unprecedented.
It is a stark reminder of the necessity of viewing these massive geopolitical shifts through multiple, distinct global perspectives. To truly understand the gravity of these events, one cannot just look at the markets in New York or London. You must look simultaneously from Washington and Tel Aviv to Beijing, Moscow, and Bogota.
Diplomatic ramifications of this crisis are still actively unfolding within the source material. We are only seeing the initial tremors of what will undoubtedly be a long-lasting geopolitical earthquake.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We invite our listeners to weigh the evidence presented today and form their own conclusions on the future of international diplomacy and global economics.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.